Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's National Training and Technical Assistance Center webinar entitled Partnering with Families, a Foundation for Success. A short disclaimer here, while this presentation was prepared for NTAC under a cooperative agreement from SAMHSA, the opinions expressed are not the views of SAMHSA or DHHS, and they are the views of the speakers and the project. A quick session security disclaimer. If for some reason any session security issues happen during today's session, we'll immediately end the session and an email will be sent out to everyone with a new join link. We will not rejoin using the same join link if there are any security issues. A little bit about NTAC project. As you can see, we have a very large multidisciplinary team. Because of this, we are able to offer multiple subject areas for you, experience, expertise, coming from each one of these different partners as part of the project. Our main goal is that all children, youth, young adults, and families with emotional or behavioral health needs can access evidence-based treatment and recovery service in a well-coordinated system of care. And as you can see from the screen here, while our main focus is the cross-sector audiences that are shown on the screen, we are able to offer trainings and technical assistance to those beyond these specific audiences. So if you're a part of one of the audiences on the screen, welcome. And if you are outside of this realm, we're glad you joined us as well. And as our services, you can see we have many that we offer and much, much more. Individual consultation, peer learning exchanges, customized coaching, training academies, podcast tools, many things that we're offering. And as time goes on, that will expand depending on your needs and what you're requesting from us that you need. So with that, we will get to the main part of the presentation, and I welcome today's presenter, Patat, and I will let you take it from here.
Well, thank you, Joanne. It's great to join you. Thank you to all of the participants who have joined today. We know you're giving up a piece of your afternoon. We appreciate that. You can go to the next slide, please. And actually, you can skip right past that because that really just talks a little bit about my footprint, which includes having helped families in the state of Maine coordinate a statewide family network, working at the National Federation of Families Office of Policy for 7 years, 11 years in a managed care environment, doing a national piece of work with managed care sites across the country, always focused on young children, youth, and families, and supporting them with family engagement. And now here at Fredla for 2 years. So it's been a nice journey. Today, we're going to focus on some pieces of the agenda that I think are important to you. I know what they are, or you wouldn't be joining us. The core principles, the value of partnerships, some evidence-informed practices, methods and strategies and opportunities to engage families, and most importantly, partnerships with family-run organizations because they are such a great resource. Next, please. So to start today, we'd like to do a little poll. If you would currently choose what role you fill, and feel free to choose all that apply. Oh, nice mix. Very nice mix of people. So welcome to you all. Thank you for taking a minute to do that. And Joanna is saying, if you have any questions during the session, post them using chat box. Thank you. Well, it looks like the most weighted participation is family or parent peer support. We have youth peer support, clinicians, supervisors, administrators, local and state government, and others. Thank you. We appreciate you responding to that poll. Next. Hold on. I have the poll still on my screen. So the learning objectives are really about how systemic family engagement can improve the effectiveness of systems and services. You know, I think we all know that it's important to get end user feedback in whatever product we're delivering, and most importantly in children's services. So to hear from young people and their families about how effective the care is, what's working, what's not working, you know, what the needs really are. Discuss ways in effective systems of care support and engage families at policy, management, and service delivery levels. And we talked about some strategies and tools earlier. So thank you. We can go to the next one, please. So why this topic? Well, it's one of the underpinnings of a system of care, and most often it is somewhat overlooked until pretty late in the game in developing a cadre of services and supports, when if actually you involve the families early on, they can help you make sure that what you're developing is the right thing to be developing. And we know this family engagement is increasingly understood as an evidence-informed best practice and as a really important piece of the ideal model of service delivery. We know that outcomes are better when families are engaged in their child's care. And for those of you who are peer support providers on today's call, we know that outcomes, even clinical outcomes for children, improve when the parents have peer support. Next, please. The other reason is because sometimes it looks like this. Now, I don't know how many of you are operating or implementing system of care grants or cooperative agreements, or you've just had a new overload of work, or people have redesigned what they thought they wanted, and you are now trying to implement things, but your workload is so full that if you put it in this vehicle, it would be sort of unmanageable. Particularly when you're developing a system of care and that go live or implementation starts, if you're funded specifically for that, you're focusing on hiring staff and ensuring there's a provider network that's adequate to meet the needs of children, youth, and families. And regardless of really good intentions, this piece of family engagement is often left until very, very late. And as a result of that, there are missed opportunities. Next. So who defines what families are? And we think families define their family members. So we like Polly Arangos, family advocate and co-founder of Family Voices in New Mexico. Little description of families here. Whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. And that really is true. And families look different. Families are defined differently by different people. And really recognizing that a family is a culture unto itself with different values and unique ways of realizing its dreams together. Families become the source of our rich cultural heritage and spiritual diversity. They create neighborhoods, communities, states, and nations. And so in any presentation that I do from FRADLA, I always use this because to us, this is a perfect definition of families. Next. So which families are we talking about today? So I want to take, I want us to think about that lived experience in raising and being responsible for a child or youth with behavioral health needs. Many times we begin to rely on voices of families, particularly at policy tables, who may or may not have lived experience. So we want to be certain that we're really including lived experience with child serving systems and both that seasoned wisdom and current experience. So it's equally important to hear about what's happening from families who have been around a while, who can help interpret what's going on today through the voice of people who have current experience. And so really having both of those experiences at the table, as I say, particularly if you're talking about shaping the work in your agency or at policy tables, is equally important. So let's talk about the experiences of the families for just a minute. So for children and youth with mental health needs and their families, the route to treatment is challenging. It's too often complicated by the very agencies that intend to support them. There are missed opportunities that leave more intensive and intrusive interventions by juvenile justice, child welfare as default solutions. We all know that experience. One of the early markers on this route relates to problems at school. And we know that sort of is one of the first red flags we see about, when children with behavioral health conditions are not getting their needs met. So a 2018 national survey of family-run organizations dedicated specifically to children's mental health indicated that a majority of families initially reach out for parent support because their child is having difficulty at school. The driver of that, fear, right? We fear that our kids are going to fail. We fear that they're not going to get what they need from their education. And I think that's probably been multiplied in the last 15 months, particularly as there's been more homeschooling, less consistency with education. Studies show that up to 65 or 70% of youth held in American juvenile detention centers have a diagnosable mental illness. And a 2004 congressional study also concluded that every day, approximately 2,000 youth are incarcerated simply because community mental health services are unavailable. So up to 80% of children in foster care have significant mental health issues. The various pathways to and through systems have are complex, and they've been formed by elements of confusion, fear, disappointment, disillusionment, frustration, desperation, and betrayal, often leaving children to be counted in the data that I just cited to you. In order to understand the unparalleled opportunity to shift the course of life for children, youth, and families, it's important to understand the landscape that impacts their journey and to help them get what they really need. So wherever or a family might show up at a door, they're very often looked at through the lens of what's behind that door, not through the lens of finding out not why they are at your door, but how they got there. Once we discover that, we can learn that the journey may have little to do with programs that are behind the door, but more to do with human needs and human potential. And that's where the really good work happens with families. So it's important to understand how to engage families and why we engage families and how to benefit. What's the return on investment from that early on so that you can maximize the opportunity to do that. Next. So families are often the only constant in a young person's life or the equation for children's mental health. We know that daycare changes to school. School year to school year, there are transitions. You get new teachers, you get exposed to new information. You may be in a new building. You may be riding a different bus. We know that providers often change. So when teachers are changing, providers are changing, communities are changing drastically, like they have for the last few months. Families are the only constant, and successfully engaging them really requires us to go above and beyond relationships. So we have to think about first relationships, and then what kinds of policies, protocols, and processes can encourage, support, and sustain an investment in their contributions. Really keeping that investment going is key, because if you engage families early on, the sustainability is far more possible, right? You even have state leadership changes, program management changes, but families can continue to advocate and be by your side to help keep things going the way that they need to. Next, please. So you're all going to be able to download the slides from today, so feel free to visit the links and learn more about this parent involvement going to family engagement and examples that illustrate that shift, and apply it in your own agencies and your own work. Next. Many people use those words interchangeably, involvement and engagement. And I think really looking at that, the last slide, helps you separate those out and really understand that that's more of a growth process or a developmental process. One is about bringing people into whatever, to participate, to be there, but really engaging people requires more effort and more focused energy. So family partnership, when moving involvement and engagement to partnership, really defines the relationships in healthcare by placing an emphasis on collaboration wherever in all healthcare settings. And family partnership builds on the concepts of involvement and engagement. So it really becomes about power sharing and promoting the health and well-being of individuals and families, and giving them sort of control, so to speak, more say, more opportunities for input and feedback, and to share insights. So families cease to be viewed as patients or clients, but as partners with valuable contributions to the relationship in decision-making. So how do you do that? Some examples could be welcoming staff in all positions. So from front desk to billing to quality improvement. Language, acknowledging parents' expertise. How we say, you know your child, you know your culture, you know your household, you know your community. And discover and use preferred methods and times of communication to really begin to engage them. And I know all of you have done some stellar work this past 15 months on being creative and innovative and how to really engage people and enter partnerships with them. Next. So do you have strategies for achieving partnerships with families? And select the best match. And if you have particular strategies that you want to share today, you can use the chat box. So are they well developed, somewhat developed? We just started, I'm not sure, and none. I'm watching the lines grow here. We'll give it a minute, make sure that all of you can participate. %62% of you have. 65. Good. So we have 19% of you say that well-developed. Kudos to you. And please make sure that you share some of your successes by the end of today. your successful strategies with others in the chat box so they can also benefit from your experience and wisdom. 43% say somewhat developed, and 38% say we just started. So I think you can learn a lot from one another today by sharing some of that experience in the chat box. Thank you for your participation in this poll. Do we have any comments in the chat box yet that might be interesting? Not yet. You're
No,
not
I don't see anybody yet.
Not sharing yet. Okay. So partnership in care calls for the same type of commitment that any successful partnership would require that you build on. You build on relationships, collaborative mindset, and a spirit of acceptance of where families are in their journey. So it's not about thinking families are at one spot or another. I think that's another important piece. Families and children's needs and families are not static. You know, it changes from day to day, can change from minute to minute during any given day. So those of us who are parents know that. And so the more that you think of that in your work, the more important that will be too. There'll be an alignment of goals, a balance of trust. We have shared responsibility for success, written policies and procedures, and that family engagement is not an add-on. It's central to everything you do. That it's transformative and flexible, that you can pivot, right? You can take input, you can take feedback, you can make adjustments. And seeing and using teaching moments, creating opportunities with families for win-wins is a really important piece of this work. Next is some of the value of family partnerships. So there is measurable value add with family engagement. It can change, build, improve, and inform, and really transforms the system in all of the areas noted. So you can change cultural practices, how you engage a variety of cultures, building awareness and understanding and new policies that better serve youth and their families. It improves individual outcomes and organizational development. How do you develop new services? How do you know what kinds of new information there is? How do you use that? How do you apply that in your work? Families can certainly be helpful in your understanding of that. And together it drives a quality improvement cycle that really informs change in your system. And when I say culture change, we're not talking about the changing the cultures of people. We're changing the culture of the environment in which people participate. Next. Oh, I like that slide. You did a nice job jazzing that up. Thank you. Joanne is a rock star. Thank you. Consider the culture of the family, the agency in your culture. You know, everybody has, I think, huge overload here when we talk about that. It's not as simple as it sounds, nor is engaging families as simple as it sounds. Culture goes well beyond items such as ethnicity and race and socioeconomic status and all the other things we think of when we hear the word culture. So we can't assume just because our skin may be the same color that the culture of our family is the same color, is the same as the next family. Or that we have children the same age, or that we share a Native American heritage, that we are like one another. So really thinking about people as individuals and understanding their own culture and the culture of their family is important, but it's even equally as important to understand the culture of the organizations you work in. and your own culture. And I'm going to say the word biases. So what are, and I'm not really fond of that word, but what is it that our viewpoints are? And what are our thoughts, and examining those in relationship to the bigger picture of culture. So our life paths are different, even within the same family. We form our own biases of ways of reacting to chaos and events. And we've all learned early on, it is what families say it is. So if it is a crisis to families, it's a crisis. So how will you spend time getting to know and respect the culture of one another? That means you and the people you're working with. And how will families help shape the culture of the organization? Is it welcoming? Is the space welcoming? Are there programs that need to be revised? How we work together to bridge the divides created by the natural biases that come from our own lived experience? And how can you engage families as cultural brokers to engage other families? To me, that's a real natural solution. We don't have to know it all, be it all, or have all the answers for anyone. We just need sometimes a little extra help in getting there. Next. Here are some of the core concepts of family partnership. So family partnership is an approach to the planning, delivery, and evaluation of healthcare that is grounded in mutually beneficial partnerships among healthcare providers and families. I love that we have probably some policymakers in today's meeting as well. So the perspective is based on the recognition that families are essential allies, that young people who are receiving services are essential allies for quality and safety, not only in direct care, but in quality improvement, in safety initiatives, in the education of health professionals, in research, in the design of your facilities, and in policy development. So partnerships with families lead to better health outcomes, improved patient and family experience of care, better clinician and staff satisfaction, and wiser allocation of resources. And I think one of the big returns on investment of partnership is no one has to own it alone. The success, for example, the success of treatment. Being a partner in care means we talk about it, we take a risk together, and we celebrate the successes, but we are also willing to basically share the responsibility for going back to the drawing board if something doesn't work. So I think that's a real key benefit to engaging families. Next. So, what is your biggest challenge to establishing partnerships with families? If you'd like to put your answer in the chat box, we'd love to see what your biggest challenge is. Anybody have a challenge? I know some people do. We had a percent who are just starting. And we have some people who have gone all the way to the other end of the spectrum here. So what was your biggest challenge in establishing partnerships with families? Recruitment. Knowing how to identify and recruit family advisors. So busy. Keeping families engaged, that is so important. When I think of that, I think about the reasons I become disengaged. So, feeling like I'm valued, feeling like I make a significant contribution, feeling that I'm heard or welcomed, feeling like it's not just busy work, so to speak. Oh, yeah, that's a good one when I'm not there and problems arise. Steady communication. Everything having to be virtual. It has been difficult starting and continuing communication. Absolutely. Christopher, thank you, because it has been terribly difficult for everyone. Funding, sustained funding to support family engagement. So some of you, it sounds like, are at a path where you really provide supports to engage the families. And that is where we would take another presentation, some things that will be on this slide deck when you download it. We've included a lot of slides that you can use for resources. They're not slides that we're going over today. Helping families understand that they really need to work on their wellness as well. Yeah. Sometimes just asking the question is important. Policies that make family engagement a requirement. So I'm wondering about that one. Does that mean that you don't have the policies, or you're having a problem getting the policies passed? Can you share a little bit more about that one with us? Thank you, Damon. Maybe. This is great feedback, and I can tell you that NTAC will be looking at what you've provided us for information today to help guide our future work in getting the policies in place that make it both reasonable and doable. Great. I think that speaks to us to also begin to collect some policies that might be helpful as a framework for some of you. Thank you. I appreciate your follow-up on that. All right. I think we can go to the next slide if everybody's done. Convincing families they can do it. Yeah, I remember. So I remember when my son was receiving services and I was driving for, I think, 2.5 hours with one of his care providers. He was in a residential setting at that time. And she said to me, "You really should be on the board of this homeless shelter." And I went like, I wouldn't even know what to do on a board of directors of a homeless shelter. And, you know, that gave us a lot of time to talk about, you know, the opportunities that accompany that. And, you know, having a family member who is doing something that you are trying to convince this family they can do, you know, having them access peer support or a family-run organization can help get them there, can help spark their energy to do it, and to look around them and see that other people have done it as well, and that they will have some support in getting there. So getting that kind of training and preparation for participation was key for me, and I know it would be for all families out there. Thank you for sharing. So I'm just going to take a minute on this slide. I'm looking at our time, and I don't want to leave you without time for any other discussion you'd like. But the principles for partnerships with families, the principles include communication. They're a little harder to read maybe there. Competence, respect, equality, advocacy, commitment, and trust, the cornerstone. So this figure displays the principles and their relationships sort of as a mobile. Thank you, Joanne. Sort of as a mobile. Each principle plays its own important role in holding up the mobile, but the cornerstone to its entire foundation is trust. So without trust, every other facet of the partnership is compromised, right? It's off balance. It won't spin right. It won't turn right. It won't hang right. It will become tangled up. So I like the way that this is demonstrated in this graphic. Next, thank you. Next. So this is where I feel like we, and I'm going to say we because I work nationally, we collectively at a national level, I think, have failed a bit. Because I don't think we've spent enough time talking about the how-to, right? We're great at talking about principles and theories, and there are wonderful things behind the curtain, but we don't talk about how to open the curtain. We don't talk about the tools that you need in order to be able to meet families where they are, to help them be connected, to really set realistic expectations. They all come to you with different experiences and skills, as well as different needs. And I think sometimes we focus too much on the needs and not enough on the experience and skills. They may have knocked on lots of doors before they've arrived at yours. And by then they may have had some not great experiences. They may feel uncertain. So really reaching out and welcoming people in a way that lets them know you're standing by their side regardless. Even if you have to turn around and replan 5 times, it's okay. You're there and you're not going to give up on them. That's really important. Not all families have the same knowledge, skills, or other resources. So being realistic in your expectations is really important. I think we've learned that one of the biggest lessons of that has been during these past 14 to 15 months, when you have people who are trying to work from home, they are trying to teach from home, and young people are trying to participate in school via technology. And so one of the big things was who has technology and who doesn't have technology. And I think if we start to approach, and even if you have technology, do you have the bandwidth that can carry everybody at 10 a.m. when, every single one of those people had meetings? Or did somebody have to change their schedule or get bumped off? So really thinking about this work of meeting people where they are and using that as one of your frameworks might be helpful in your conversation. And while one child may be the focus of services, it's important to keep in mind the whole child. What are their strengths? What are their gifts? What are their talents? What are the ways in which the whole family, including the siblings and others in the house, can contribute? What is the picture really looking like, so that the expectations are realistic? Transitions coming into services can set the tone and engage a family or turn them off. Staff and intake procedures. If you have to tell your story 4 times in the same agency, something's wrong. It's really a turn off. People get frustrated. It's not just about telling your story, it's talking about your experience. And some of those experiences have been traumatic. So think about that, how you can cut down on the processes as well. What else does it take? Let's go to the next slide. And we mentioned resources a few minutes ago, tangible and logistical relationships with family-run organizations. Really having strategic recruitment methods. We have a training that could really be helpful with that. So whoever said they were having a problem with recruitment, I have some materials that could help you. Feel free to email me, phunt@predla.org, if anybody wants. If you would, Joanne, maybe you could put that in the chat box and let me know. The other thing is around retaining family members and really a tracking process that can go with that. So, you know, if you're charged or tasked with hosting policy groups, really how you track membership is important, because I think policy groups lose the most family members of any groups I know. And there are lots of reasons for that. But how to be strategic in recruitment, doing targeted outreach, having families be the partners who do that recruitment rather than someone who doesn't quite get or make it as comfortable for families as another family member would. And really planning for turnover and transitions is absolutely key. Next. And maybe we could put this link in the chat box as well for folks, or you will have it on the slides if you download them. But families come to you with different experiences and skills. There's a great way, 10 tips to outreach to families. And that's only about outreach. That is not about engagement. It's not even about involvement. It's about outreach. But that is where you're going to start in order to get people involved, engaged, and then as partners. So I'm wondering if you could take a second in the chat box and tell me, how does your organization welcome families? Do you have a particular process that does that? Do you have a way? Do you have a process for welcoming families to your organization? Not really yet. Christopher, thank you. Maybe that's food for thought. Sometimes the question is food for thought. I think, are we at our last? We have one more. Definitely. Yeah, definitely food for thought. Thank you. Do we have one more slide, Joanne? I'm reading these comments. We do. We have a poll. You guys haven't had enough polls today. What is your biggest success in engaging families to related to the service or practice level, working in your agency, on governance planning councils, or other policy setting groups? What is your biggest success in one of those areas? Tell me what is your biggest success. Sounds like we should be hearing from some of the service and practice level folks who are really feeling like they're engaging families. Working in your agency, on governance and planning councils, or policy setting groups. So we have 50% of the people voted. I wonder what this would really look like if 75% voted. No takers. Okay, with 53% on the board, they feel the best success has been with the service of practice level, planning councils, policy. Good, we're up to 62%. Thank you. And it seems to be holding true across the board. And working in your agency. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. All right, I'm gonna make some time now. If you have specific questions, I really wanted to leave 15 minutes. I want to let you know that the slide deck, should you download it, has points to ponder, strategies, and examples for all three of those arenas. whether it's at the practice level, working in the agency, or on governance or policy setting groups. So if you download the presentation, you'll also have some key information and strategies for how to move that forward. Thank you. I can't thank you all enough, and I can't thank Joanne enough for her help today. So let's go to the chat box, or raise your hand, or folks have questions. We'll give you a minute. No questions? Now's the time to hit me with them. Joanne, you want to do a wrap up? Are there any points you'd like discussed? You'd like to hear? Is there a question you'd like to pose to others who have joined today's call? You have a lot of expertise on this call. Is there something you'd like to ask all the other people on the call? How should our agencies be welcoming families? What has been your biggest challenge with engaging families? Now we're going to everyone. Good chats. So let me talk for a minute about agencies welcoming families. Very often agencies are hiring a family member who does that orientation and welcoming piece, and helps families, parent support partners, whatever, who can help families, fill out forms, answer questions about what the process is. And I love the question about fathers and father figures. And actually, we're going to be doing some work this summer on fathers and father figures, because it's really important to gauge fathers. Absolutely. All the research tells us the reasons why. So I encourage you to stay tuned to NTAC, because there'll be some great information about fathers forthcoming. And it won't be presented by me, it will be presented by fathers. So. We often hear from direct service staff, they don't know how to have the difficult conversations. Sometimes difficult conversations are easier to have when the environment changes. So let me just say, I'll give an example. For those of you who are parents, there may be some conversations you may want to have. If you're a mom, you might want to have that conversation with your teenage son while you're driving in a car, right? So there are conversations that are difficult with families. Sometimes you may just need a different type of space, or a better space if you're in an office, particularly a more comfortable, less formal space. Maybe a cup of coffee or a glass of lemonade, having the conversation in an honest and forthright way, and maybe saying up front, I really need, I don't like complex conversations, and I'm going to, I want us to be forthright with each other because I want to hear you, really putting it out there, I think, in a way that you would talk with your friends, in a way that you would talk with your family, and not thinking you have to do anything different than you would if it were your friend or family that you had to have a difficult conversation with. How to approach professionals when reminding them to speak less jargon. Jargon does make you want to leave. It's frustrating, and I'm probably equally as guilty of it. seeing people as equals. I think picking up a piece of the workload and saying, you know, I can do that. Here's what we've done. I think many times others don't know what families have done and have accomplished, or how resilient they are. And that's why I talked earlier about not why are you at my door, but how did you get here? Those are important conversations, and sometimes they call for taking a risk. Sensitive topics, exactly. Thank you for putting a resource in there. Speaking less jargon, I think sometimes always asking, you know, you may have to always be the one, but share it around if you can. What does that mean? Can you remind me again what that means? Because sooner or later, people will not use as much of it. That's just one strategy. I'm trying to get back. Is there a toolkit available for family advocates and use in general to engage families? Yeah, my top tips on difficult conversations are to make sure the environment is a welcoming environment, not a formal environment. You know, taking a family member into a big old boardroom, you know, with that big wide table, and you know, that doesn't work. You know, a couch and a chair maybe. You know, and just being forthright sometimes about your own feelings about how you have conversations. So I can't wait to see your resource that you put in the box. And where do I find the slides to download? Joanne, do you have an answer for that?
A copy of the presentation was attached to the reminder email earlier, but I've also just put it into the chat box here, and you can download a copy of the PDF of today's presentation directly from the chat box.
Okay. Thank you. Parent Leadership Toolkit. Thank you, Deepa. I'm giving everybody a minute to download the presentation if you want. I will tell you there's some great information later in the presentation about each of the areas. And when I say that, it's engaging families in care in your agency. And when I say that, both as employees in an agency and as board members or governance and as management in your agency. So, and then also at other policy tables. Has everybody had time to download? Other feedback, questions you'd like to raise, comments you'd like to make? I really do think the jargon thing is a huge issue, and other things such as making information available on time. If you're in a policy meeting in particular, getting all this stack of papers you need to vote on or have a discussion on as you walk through the door is not helpful. So making sure that people have timely information in a format that they can use and can access it in a variety of ways is really key for policy tables. Well, I think that's going to do it today. If you don't have any other questions or comments, and Joanne, I think you want to talk about feedback.
Yes. Thank you so much, Pat. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
So thank everybody for attending today. Definitely thank you for your input into the chat box. We'll take that, and along with any feedback that you provide us in the feedback form or survey that'll appear once we close out of today's session. And we really look at that information and take to heart what you're needing as an organization or as providers. and take that and create the trainings and put together resources for you. So it's really important if you can take a few minutes and complete the feedback form that will appear. And then we'll be able to create some new trainings for you in addition to the great ones that we have coming up this summer. So keep an eye out. You can see here's our social media channels for the Intact Project, as well as our website. Keep an eye out there for the upcoming trainings that will be happening this summer and beyond. And also that is where we post recordings to any of the previous trainings that we have. So those will start going up there as well. And then also, if you need to request any kind of technical assistance from us, all you have to do is click on that link there on the slide and reach out to us. We can provide whatever help we can to you. So with that, we really appreciate you being here today. And Pat, thank you again for the great presentation today, and looking forward to future ones that are coming up. So again,
You're very welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you on the next session. Thank you.